Hey, and welcome to the Built Different series. This is a Banyan Labs series. My name is Jake Shafer. I'm your host. And today I get the wonderful honor and privilege of sharing some time with Stephen Cook, who is not only a senior architect, but is also a dear friend of mine and my mentor. Stephen, thanks so much for joining. Do you want to say hi?
Hey, Jake. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Man, I'm excited about the time that we get to spend today. I want to just talk about some of the things that we're doing. I want to get into Armada Core, but before we do that, just talk a little bit about, your role and day-to-day life at Banyan.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, a good friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, I'm working with this organization that is really big, specifically on second chance." And he was telling me about the work that they were doing. And so I thought, that'd be kind of cool to, be a part of something that's kind of at a ground level and with in a different domain than I've ever worked in. And as I started off kind of getting in and working, I started getting to know a lot of the folks. And the more and more that I, kind of mingled with folks and got into the projects, I started realizing I really, really enjoyed the group of people, not just the technical work. And so, what it's really become over the last, say, 9, 10 months has been a little bit of a mix of, yeah, kind of senior architect type work and definitely doing the technical things, but some mentoring and just kind of becoming a person that folks can come to and ask questions from a technical perspective, a professional perspective. So I kind of walk around the virtual hallway of Banyan and enjoy, chewing the fat with a lot of folks. And I learned so much from a lot of the OJT folks and others on the Banyan team, probably as much or more than they could ever learn from me.
That's awesome. Well, I can, from personal experience, we appreciate you being there and dedicating your time. And you bring a lot of experience to the base. Talk to us a little bit about your experience in the tech space.
Yeah. So when I was in the Army, I guess I worked around technology. I was a linguist in the military, so I got a lot of exposure to electronic tech and my curiosity, I guess, about kind of what was under the hood. And so whenever I got out of the Army, I started doing just some basic web design. And then I started doing a little bit more kind of black box testing, as they call it, a little bit more work on larger systems. And again, that old curiosity about what's under the hood came about. And so I ended up getting an opportunity to kind of work in a setting where I was doing a lot of documentation and testing very large systems, very complex systems. So it was really at that point that I decided, I really want to go back to school and really dig into this. And so went back to school, got my master's in software engineering. And from that point forward, just never looked back. And so I've been building a lot of systems that have to do with large data analytics, complex systems, disparate systems that have to work with one another across disparate domains. And so I've found it challenging and I've found it very rewarding. And to be able to be at Banyan and kind of start bringing some of those ideas has been really cool.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Armada Core. This is, man, talk about an engine, right? So first, tell us a little bit about what it is, and then tell us about how it came to be.
Yeah. So number one, Armada Core is really a number of services that sit behind an API, right? A gateway. And so that's kind of the technical, sense of, API gateway, a lot of different services. The main thing, the big difference is that this provides agentic services and a range of different resources for the agent to be able to pull from, and it can
Mm,
kind of loop through all of those resources and have stacked reasoning. And so it's kind of that chain link of resources and the LLM, the large language model agent, being able to kind of take all that together, reason across it, and return answers to questions. And so
yeah.
what really kind of started it was Banyan was going to build a product called Harper, and the idea was it was going to be your personal assistant. And so we started having some interest from a number of potential clients, potential customers. and we realized we're going to have to build this almost individual, for each one of them, right? It's going to be kind of a cookie cutter. We have to build it here, and then we have to kind of build it again. We're just kind of replicating the same thing. But what if they ask for something unique and something different? And so we started thinking about it in terms of how could we do the heavy lift right now? And then everything after that is just a small investment. And so, or rather, a small lift. And so think of Armada Core kind of like a power grid, if you will. A power grid, every house, every home, every business, every building can just kind of hook up to that power grid versus having to put a generator in every single home, every single business. And now that you've built the power grid, just putting a home or a business, whatever building on that power grid is an incremental, just a small effort versus having to go ground up every single time. And so
Yeah.
Armada Core serves kind of this duplicating itself because now, however many number of applications can register with Armada Core, and it can have its own unique experience based on its own needs and offerings that Armada Core has.
Yeah. So for the layman, right? If I own a business and I'm interested in those agentic services, right? And
Yeah.
I come to you or to Matthew at Banyan, I say, hey, I'm interested in partnering. So if I partner with you guys and get to use Armada, what kind of services would that afford me? What would I get for that?
Yeah, so there feels like there's a couple of actual layers there, right? So who would even be interested in Armada Core? So, any company, and I mean, there could be any number of reasons. And if any two of these reasons resonate with you, then Armada Core is probably for you. Do you have multiple public facing applications or applications, website, or maybe something internal for your company? Armada Core can help you with a single point of truth? Do you have data that is in disparate places and you can't seem to get it all into the same spot, but you need to be able to kind of reach out into all those places and have, again, a single point where it all comes together? Armada Core might be for you too. Are you in an air gap situation where you can't you can't reach out into the world, right? For
Yeah.
various reasons. Maybe you've got unique information, right, that you don't need to put out on the cloud or whatever. Armada Core can operate in those environments. Do you have data that you're concerned because of certain constraints, right? And so you don't need to share that data with somebody else. You need to be able to kind of maintain it yourself and only point your application to it. Then Armada Core can help you. And so it appeals to potential customers who want that agentic reasoning across all of their data, and they want to keep it divided and they want to keep it safe. And they, again, kind of going back to the cookie cutter, they don't want to have to create they don't want to create separate applications, right? And have to bring
Yeah.
that agentic power separately to each one. They can kind of register each application with Armada Core. It'll come with whatever context they want it to have and configuration, and then it'll serve those unique needs that each application has. And so, if you have any of those kind of needs, then Armada Core, you should check it out.
Awesome. So, in layman's terms, and this is what, when we talk to interested partners, right, we say it's a domain expert, right? And so it's this idea of having someone in your company who has read every email, who's been a part of every board meeting,
Yeah,
right? Who knows everything about your institution. And there are several implications there, right? So, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about how could that benefit a corporation. I think about onboarding, right? Onboarding new employees and how that can be expedited. I think about how, training could be expedited. I
yeah,
think about how communication could be improved and real time intelligence could be made available,
yeah,
right? What are some of the other implications for that?
yeah. So I think the analogy that comes to my mind, right, is the difference between a librarian and an analyst. Your
Yeah.
traditional application, your so-called CRUD application, it's kind of like a librarian. Hey, do you have any books on such topic? Right? Yeah, here, let me show you how to use a card catalog, right? And flip through or go on the computer and type in your keyword search or whatever, the author. But that assumes the user knows what they're looking for, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that assumes I know the author's name or I know the title. But if I don't know the author's name or the title and I just know it's about, I don't know, metallurgy or something like that, and I type that in, I'm going to get, you know, 50 books, 500 books, 5,000 books, right? Whereas with this, it's more like an analyst. The idea being that, again, if you have a single database or an API or whatever those endpoints are where there's data sitting there, then what Armada Core does is it uses the LLM orchestrator to access all of those based on the query that the user has given it. And it thinks about that query and it says, okay, well, here's the intent, here's what I'm gathering from it. And then it goes and it pulls from those multiple data sources, brings it back together, and it reasons across that collective of data and can return insight that you didn't know was sitting there. Because again, the difference is you know what you're looking for, and so you go look for that specifically versus I generally know what I want or I'm asking, but I don't know all the
Yeah.
corners of it. And so this can search through all of your data and bring back potentially, like you said, information and intelligence that you didn't know and you weren't really looking for, and you were asking it to express it and reveal it to you. And so
Yeah.
I think for businesses, some practical applications are, asking questions about the customer base, asking questions about products, asking questions about potentially the community, where there might be better investment opportunities for your store. There's all kinds of use cases that I can think of from a business intelligence perspective. Now
Yeah.
apply that to other domains of expertise if a company wants to, point toward data that geospatial data, right? It can start reasoning across geospatial data. So I can think of a bunch of areas, and and again, it's going to look at and bring back information from areas that you didn't realize. It'll help you uncover those things.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I love that. So every time I have the opportunity to visit with one of our engineers, right, I always ask them, right, with what they're building, what they're architecting, and how they're leading their teams, like what's been the most
Good.
challenging technical problem? And because of your expertise, right, your answer is going to be, I'm anticipating your answer being different, right? Your answer is not going to be as a junior engineer, right, challenges with a language or, understanding and filling your own bucket with learning. So for Armada Core, because it is so complex and so rich, right, what has been your most challenging technical problem that you've had to deal with and encounter?
No doubt, communication.
Okay.
Communication is really tough.
So just walk us through what that looks like.
Yeah. So well, I think a great example would be, you and me, Jake, for example. You'll come to me occasionally and say, "Hey, we're talking to a potential customer, and they're asking about such and such. Could we do such and such? Could we this or could we that?" And I'll have a conversation with the CTO as well. And hey, can Armada Core do this thing, right? And so, how do you communicate back how it can do it, how to articulate, that capability. And so a lot of times that becomes one of my greatest frustrations, is just kind of trying to get it out of my head and get it out of my head in a way that's meaningful to other people. I used to think I was a great communicator, and the older I get, the more I realize I'm not as good at it. My wife looks at me with that glossy stare sometimes, and that's when I realize I'm not communicating well right now, am I? But I think what I'm learning, I'm not going to say I've learned it. I think what I'm learning is to focus on how it solves a problem, well, not how it solves it from a technical perspective, but from a practical perspective. So if someone wants to know, well, tell us about Armada Core, rather than me talk about the technology stack, the languages that we've chosen to develop it out, how it's designed, what design patterns it uses, architectural decisions, and things like that. Certainly, if they want to get into that, we're ready to hold those discussions, those
Right.
conversations, but rather what can it do to solve their problem? So when the CTO comes to me, or if you come to me, or whomever says, hey, can it do this? Then the first thing I want to know is, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then based on that, be able to say, yes, we can solve that problem. by, they just need to give us access to this, they just need to let us this, and we can solve that problem. Most of the time, when I just kind of walk through the problem, it usually resonates and connects with the person that's asking me. It's if I fly into the more of the technical side that I start getting the kind of the tilted head and
Yeah.
that look of you're not making any sense, Stephen. And it's really not because I'm like talking at some sort of grand level. It's because this stuff is complex
Yeah.
and it's also
Yeah.
fairly new. A lot of the technology that we're really building is really new. So everyone's still trying to get their head around it, right? So it's not
Yeah.
that I'm sitting up on some sort of ivory tower talking above people's heads. I'm just maybe slightly a half a step ahead of them, is all, right? They're going to catch up
Yeah.
with me fast. So
Well, let me say first, I think that you're a great communicator, and I think that you have a beautiful ability of taking complex things and making them simple, so that people like me who are new to the space can understand those, can turn those into actionable items, right? Can mobilize that knowledge, and so I really appreciate that about you.
thank you.
I want to, man, because you bring such a wealth of experience and knowledge. I want to capitalize on this moment. So we're talking about something that's enterprise grade, right? I mean, this is a massive structure. So just in your experience and from your expertise, what is your philosophy on building enterprise grade software versus like quick prototypes?
Yeah. Yeah. So this topic can really go down a rabbit trail because anyone who's been around kind of the smaller project kind of arena, a small website, a small widget or something like that, up to maybe a moderately sized project. It's always been, a challenge to kind of say to people, well, hey, here's what the effort's going to be. And you'll oftentimes hear, well, why is it going to take so long? Why is it going to cost so much? Or, because oftentimes in people's minds, they think, well, that it should be easy, that should only take maybe a week or two or maybe a month or two. And then, so it's hard to get, them to get their head wrapped around what it's really going to take. And so now add, agentic, resources that are out there now and, what's become popularly known as, vibe coding and all of that. It has compacted that even more to the point where it's like, can't you build this in a weekend? Can't you do this quickly? Why is this taking, a month, a two, three? Why would that take 6 months if you have all of these new tools, right? And so it kind of lends to it draws my attention to a conversation that you and I have had a number of times, and that is in order to do these things, you have to understand more complex concepts. It's not enough just to simply go vibe code out, build me this widget and I want the widget to do this. But you need to already kind of understand how you want that widget to work and how you want that item to work. And you need to understand engineering principles that you
Yeah.
want the agent to use. And so there's some heavy lifting done on the front end of doing heavy writing of your documentation, eliciting your requirements, and making sure you've got it all right, and that back and forth with the customer. And so it's really when you're building these even more complex systems, it has to do with making sure you're capturing the intent of the stakeholder, the user, making sure you have those requirements straight, and then getting your documentation right on the front end, and then designing it, building it out, developing it out, and then that iteration process, right? And
Right.
so a lot of people know it as agile, like with Scrum or whatever, methodology they're using, and kind of iterating through and making sure that we're building the right thing. And so when you're building these more complex systems, that requires more human communication.
Right.
You have to make sure that you're iterating through everything and keeping the stakeholders in the loop, the product owner in the loop. And that doesn't happen on a Saturday, right? That doesn't happen one day or within a week with these more complex systems. You really have to plan it out and make sure you're keeping them included in that process. And so that doesn't happen overnight. That takes some time, and the bigger, the more complex the system, then the more attention that needs to be given to the things that can break a project down. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to articulate that because, again, a lot of folks, especially in today's environment, think, "Oh man, you could build that out, on a Saturday, right?" Can't tell you how many times
Yeah.
I've heard people say, I just sat down and for a couple hours I did this on, one day, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah, so that reminds me, I try to read as much as I can, try to be, a forever learner. And one of the verbs that I'm hearing a lot and seeing a lot, which I think speaks to what we're talking about, is this idea of AI generated
Mhm.
versus AI accelerated, right?
Mm,
And that latter term strongly indicates that you already have that foundation and that knowledge of how things are supposed to be built.
yeah.
And so those artificial intelligence tools that we have only accelerate that expertise versus, a 2 or 3 sentence prompt, hey, build me a meal planner app, right?
Yeah.
And I just from what I'm learning, and you'll be able to speak to this more than I can, but it's this idea of, we have to understand, just like you said, how things are architected,
Mhm.
how they fit together, how they're supposed to fit together, and then using our AI tools to accelerate the process, but not to skip the step.
Hmm. You said it best. I can't articulate it any better than that. It's not replacing me. It's almost like it's 10xing me. So, we used to
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
10x, developers, and and it's almost like it, 100x's me. There's things now where I'm able to, you know, I've shared with some folks kind of my process, and I might start off with, you know dozens of pages that I've written that I sit and I do the architecture and I write up everything, the software requirement specification, diagrams, all of that,
yeah,
and then hand that body of my knowledge to it. And
yeah,
now all of a sudden, that's a different animal. That's a completely different thing at that point because, and you and I've talked about this. If you talk to an agent, to an LLM at the level of, elementary school, it'll talk to you at that level. Talk to it at the high school level, the college level. But if you come to it and talk to it at that high level of, engineering nomenclature, it will level up because it's
yeah,
ready. It's capable of doing that. So doing the hard work up front, getting all of that together, as you're saying, the engineering, architecture, and making sure you have that straight, then it's not just simply generating something, it's assisting me and
right.
augmenting, carrying out what I've asked it to do at that higher level. And so you said it very succinctly. There is a difference between those two.
Yeah, for sure. So, man, because you already have an established process and you already have an idea of what your workflow is going to be, and you have so much experience with what designs work best, right? Has working at Banyan Labs shaped or molded your approach to software development?
Yeah, it's there's definitely been some things that I've pivoted. I kind of come from a bit of a background where you're not you don't have as much access to resources online because you might be
Yeah,
working in an air gap environment, right? Where you can't just
yeah,
go out and download whatever you want and have all the near real time access to resources, to tools. And so this has given me, kind of an opportunity to, start looking at all those resources. There's a bit of a balance there too. You and I've kind of discussed this before, and that is you can have kind of sensory overload too, because there's
yeah,
just too
yeah.
much out there. I mean, do I use this tool? Do I use this tool? What new framework came out this week in JavaScript? And so you do have to kind of remain focused and become good at a particular short stack of things. But I think at Banyan, the thing that's really challenged me is to be more aware, right, of what's going on Main Street, what's going
Yeah.
on in the marketplace of software versus, a lot of times in, say government contracting, there feels like there's a pretty big lag, right? So something new came out today. It may take 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then by the time, inside the walls of some government contract, it finally gets on board with something that came out a few years earlier. Now that's changed. And so working at Banyan has definitely given me the opportunity to be much more aware and also to hear from new talent what their concerns are,
Yeah.
um, and what are they concerned about and what are they thinking about, and especially from some of the unique circumstances folks are coming from. As a second chance organization, there's a bit of a Venn diagram with the population, the group at Banyan, and the rest of the general population of the country. We all want a good job. We all want to take care of our
Yeah.
loved ones. We all want to do something meaningful, but there are certain inhibitions. There are certain fears. There are certain concerns that second chance population has that is not on my mind every single
Yeah.
day. And so, kind of coming into that environment and working with folks and the technology domain that we're working in, how can I help them kind of find their path and find their way in technology and address their unique life circumstances, their
Yeah.
situation in life, and um, that's kind of new to me. And I don't want to call it a ministry, but it feels like something close to it. Something to where
Yeah.
you're helping people get to the next thing that they need to get to, and that's good. I like it. It's something
Yeah.
very rewarding.
This is not, meant to be uh, a podcast where we talk exclusively about spiritual things, but I know that just in our conversations, one of the great connections that we have is our desire to be loyal to King Jesus. And I love the idea of right moment, right people, right place, right time. While, we live and breathe and we do our daily work, right? There are always those opportunities to um, share life, right?
Yeah,
Even in a virtual setting like this, where so many of the people that work at Banyan live in different states and, oh my goodness, in different time zones, right?
yeah,
Scheduling in different time zones. But even in that, right? Even through software,
yeah,
right? Being able to just share life and to have an opportunity, right, to be a blessing in someone else's day to day, right? It's so powerful. So
yeah,
thank you so much for saying that.
yeah.
Man, I want to spend our last few moments giving you a platform to pass along some wisdom to people who are just now joining the space. Right. A lot of our great folks that we work with at Banyan are, they've gone through the Persevere program and they're dabbling in this space and they're doing it for all of the reasons that you just said, right? We want to make a difference. We want to transform from that old life and now being just as impacted and restarting. We want to take care of our loved ones. We want to have jobs that are not only lucrative but that are meaningful and give us that satisfaction of working and working well. So what advice would you give newcomers to the space, to the engineering, the software development space? If you could say one thing to them, what would that be?
Oh my, I'm not known for lucid brevity, so I've I'm not known for being a one word person. I'll just I'll just pass on some wisdom that someone gave me years ago. I think it was around, goodness, man, I don't even remember the year. I just joined the army. I'd finished my initial training and all that, and was graduating from this course. And they were having kind of a after graduation party with all the officers and all the folks that went through the program and all. And my commander, he was a new commander for our unit, and he walked up to me and congratulated me for completing the course and all that. And I said, "Sir," I said, I'm about to head to my first duty station. What advice could you give me?" And he said, "Well, that's easy." And I was like, "Okay." So I was all ears. He said, "Stay humble, stay hungry, and stay motivated." And he went on to kind of explain himself. Stay humble. He said, be teachable. Don't walk
Yeah.
into your new place thinking you know it all, because you don't. Some of these guys are coming back. They're battle hardened.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear it from some newbie like you, right? So stay humble, be teachable, stay hungry, always be ready to learn something new, go after it, go look for opportunity, and then stay motivated. And the difference between staying hungry and motivated, sometimes your hunger can motivate you, but
Yeah.
motivation is also, you might have done a good job today and feel very satisfied and not hungry, right? But the rent is due every day, right?
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got to get up and you've got to not live the next day on the laurels of the day before, but you've got to say, all right, I'm motivated now. It's a new day and I'm going to do my work today. And that work might simply be learn something new. It might be do something simple. It might
Yeah.
be do something hard, something you don't like. I think that that's applies to any domain, but it applies to what we're doing too. And I would say to folks that are coming into, whether it be into Banyan or any of our sister organizations, across the family, or anyone who's listening that's not even a part of our organization or
Yeah.
second chance organization, stay humble, be ready to be taught something, right? Listen to people
Yeah.
and learn from people. Stay hungry. Don't get just satisfied with the one thing that you did well. Keep pressing
Right.
and stay motivated. Get up every day. Find the meaningfulness in what's going on, as you kind of intimated earlier. The place that Jesus plays in the role he plays in my life when I'm not finding meaningfulness necessarily in the keystrokes that I've got, whatever,
Yeah.
than just simply knowing that I'm growing where I'm planted. I'm doing what it is he wants me to do right now. I'm interacting with people that he has in my life. That alone motivates me when nothing else is. And
Yeah.
so find the things that motivate you. And so that would be the advice, I guess, in the
Awesome. Man, Stephen, I tell you this all the time, and I'm sure you get tired of hearing it. I do appreciate you so much. I value our friendship and I value your expertise. And I thank you for being with me on the podcast today to share some of that with the people in our space, our audiences. Man, thanks again. Just thank you so, so much.
Absolutely, brother. It's my pleasure to be on here. I enjoy the time I get to hang with you. And when you mentioned, kind of doing this, I was like, yeah, I'd love to, man. Anytime I get to hang out and just chat about stuff with Jake, then it's always a good time.
Thanks. And if you're watching, we thank you so much for listening in and for just hearing about some of the great things we're doing at Banyan. If you're interested in some of those things, you can reach out to us at banyanlabs.io. All of us are on LinkedIn. You can reach out to us that way. Our CTO is Matthew Wallace, and we would love to have a conversation about some of the solutions that we offer. And if you're just interested in learning more, give us a shout out. Thanks, everybody.